We're talking about relationships between the sexes, and in this session I want to talk about why family, or another way to title it would be the reason for the acceleration to fleshly indulgences. In my dealing with young people over the years, and even older people, I've been very interested to see that there is a tremendous acceleration towards fleshly indulgences. In other words, young people are not home on a Saturday night at 8:30 saying, "Oh, I think I'll go to bed. It's boring and nothing to do." But usually people are out saying, "Let's get crazy, let's get stoned, let's get women, let's get men, let's do something." And I've marveled about why is there such an acceleration in fleshly indulgence. And so I would like to suggest to you that we can understand this if we go back to God's ideal. God's ideal is that there be one mommy and one daddy producing a child. Now, please understand, even if this doesn't exist anywhere, God still designed something, and I want you to see why He designed it. So even in your situation, or anybody's situation you minister into, you can help get back to what God originally designed. All right? These people love each other and love and obey God. They also love and care for the child. That was God's ideal, that two people would love each other, they would love God, and they would love and care for, take care of, develop their child. The child then, indicated by the line here, the child submits to the parent. That's why God designed it so that you were born as an infant, to assist you to dependence and submission. Because if you didn't depend on somebody, you would have died because you didn't know how to walk or talk or know how or what to do. Now, these things all culminate in what's produced by this is it produces a covering. A covering is there because of the combination of love and care on the part of the parents and submission on the part of the child. The covering produces a protection from the enemy, and the protection produces security, and the security produces right direction in life and right personality development. Right direction in life and right personality development. The love of the parents for each other, the love and obedience the parents have towards God, produces, with the submission of that by the child, produces a covering, which produces a protection, which produces security in the personality, and a secure personality tends to find right direction in life, meaning my priorities. Instead of being a criminal, I'm going to be a good citizen, and a right personality development. Then rather than being a wounded person, there is a somewhat whole person. That's why God created families. Now, in God's ideal, years ago, the child did not leave this protective situation, indicated here, did not leave this protective situation until the very day they were joined to a wife or husband. That was God's ideal. For instance, let's have a look at a well-known story in the book of Genesis, not because we're espousing this cultural method, but because it illustrates God's intention. How many of you know the story in the Old Testament of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob in the book of Genesis? Wave at me if you've ever heard of this story. Okay, Abraham had a son by the name of Isaac. And one day Abraham gets up and said, "Hey, Isaac, I think it's about time for you to have a wife." And Isaac said, "Well, that confirms what I've been feeling, Father." In other words, we don't want parents controlling children, but we don't want children being independent from parents. So here was this combination thing where both were being led by God. So Abraham commissions the family servant who rides off on his camel across the desert to get a wife for Isaac. And as he's riding his camel across the desert, he's saying, "Oh God, how will I ever know what is right and compatible for Isaac and will knock his fuses out?" And God says, "Hey, I happen to like Isaac. I happen to know exactly everything about his personality and his temperament. I actually even created his sexuality, and I know exactly what to give Isaac to knock his fuses out." Meanwhile, Rebekah, in another town, gets up in the morning and her father says, "Rebekah, I've been praying and I feel like it's about time for you to have a husband." She says, "Oh, Father, that confirms exactly what God has been saying to me." That day on the way to the village well, she is going along saying, "Oh God, how will I ever know what kind of a husband I am to have that will be really wonderful to me and I will be wonderful to him?" Well, God says, "I happen to like you, Rebekah, and I have something in mind for you that will absolutely blow your fuses." So he says to the family servant, "When you get to the well near this particular city, there will be a young woman there and she will offer to water your camels." He says to Rebekah, "I know this is not done in the culture, but there will be a man with camels at the well and you are to offer to water his camels." Something that is not normally done, that a female offers to water the camels of a strange male. So when she gets to the well, sure enough, here's the man with camels. She says, "Can I water your camels, sir?" And he says, "Oh, yes, you can. And I will come home with you." And she says, "Yes, isn't this wonderful?" So they go home. He meets the father. Everybody rejoices. She packs her suitcase, gets on the camel, and they ride back off across the desert. Meanwhile, Isaac is saving hundreds and hundreds of dollars on Camaros and aftershave and theater tickets. He is not dating around. He is simply out there working in the field, and he sees these camels coming in the distance, and he said, "Oh, must be my wife." Totally relaxed, trusting God. And the Bible records that they rode up on the camel, and Rebekah jumps off and dusts herself off and straightens her clothes. And the family servant says, "Isaac, this is Rebekah. She's your wife." And the Bible records, and he loved her. Just like that. Now you're sitting here saying, "Nah, can't work. You got to get to know them. You got to spend time. You got to date around. You got to try different ones. You got to shop around. You got to communicate and go places together and get into each other's lives." Well, listen, I'm not here to espouse this method in your culture because it will never come. I am simply trying to show you that there are ways that any cultural method would work, and there are ways that any cultural method will fail. And before you get too braggadocious about your particular way of finding a life partner, let me remind you something about your culture. It's got the greatest degree of failure in the history of mankind. So don't be so hot on your method of finding a life partner, folks, because it has a failure rate that's greater than any one in history. The point is this: I don't think God cares whether you date or whether you don't date. I don't think God is into arranged marriages by parents, because parents can be just as selfish as children, and I've seen some tremendous hurt that comes through arranged marriages. So I'm not espousing any particular cultural method. I'm simply saying if we got all of the right things, that is, people who are trusting God and people who are trusting one another as parent and child, any method will work. Dating will work, arranged marriages will work if everybody's unselfish and if everybody's listening to God. The point of my story is, from the Old Testament, not that we should try to duplicate it in our culture, but the point of my story is Isaac trusted God, and God really was interested in Isaac and Rebekah, and it worked out. So whatever method you use, trust God and He will direct you in a direction. The point is, he was under submission to his father, she was under submission to her father, till the very day that they were linked together. So what happens then is you got these two people who come out of a protective situation, and they come out of that circle only for the purpose of being joined together. Now, we've already talked about this. What happens is you got two people here, and in every wedding and marriage ceremony in every culture, whether they're Christians or non-Christians, two things happen. With their hearts, they commit to each other. I love you, you love me. And with their mouths, they confess seemingly insignificant little vows like I do, I will, yes, I want. Just like you pronounce a seemingly insignificant little sinner's prayer and you're transformed eternally from being a child of the devil and full of sin to being cleansed and forgiven and on your way to heaven and born again. And the other thing, and by that process, a bolt of lightning comes out of the blue, as we said earlier, and these two people are riveted together in one. Let no man put asunder what God has joined. The other thing that we said happens is there is a ring of protection that's put around there. Now, let me show you what happens. Everybody see the ring of protection? This is what happens in every marriage and every culture that God sanctions. Now, what happens then is children are born. Nature takes its course. Everybody see this? But look where the children are born. The children are born into the circle. Have you ever wondered why the devil can't come up to a baby crib and possess a baby? They can't resist the devil. Depending on your theology, they're not washed in the blood of Jesus. Unless you're an infant baptizing denomination, they haven't been baptized yet. How come the devil can't just come up and possess a child? Because they're born inside the protective circle. This circle here is what I call the family circle, which is not a magazine in this case. It is a literal living entity that's set up, just like this one here. It is a place that all of these people, not only husband and wife, are joined, but look at this. The husband, the parents, and the children are spiritually linked to each other within that circle. Now, the devil does not like this, because when he comes here, he can't get in. He is in the same position he was in the Garden of Eden. He was in the Garden of Eden, but he had no access. So what he does is he tempts the people inside to let him in. And that's why the devil is so hell-bent in breaking down family. Do I need to prove that to you? Have you noticed that within our society? But we often don't understand the spirit world ramifications of the breakdown of family. So here are the three ways that we break down the family. Number one, we break down the family by separation and divorce. Now notice I didn't just put divorce, because you can separate even short of divorce. Okay, we're going to stay married, but I'm going to live my life and you're going to live your life. We're going to be independent from each other. You go your way and I'm going to go my way. And these two people have put asunder. Everybody watch the illustration here? They have put asunder what God has joined. There is a separation even within the marriage, and when that happens, I want you to notice something here. There is a hole in the wall. And the enemy is able to get in here and attack and bring insecurity and wounding and hurt. Some of you have experienced this. And then, of course, if divorce takes place, then it is all the more complete. The second way that the enemy gets in is through neglect. Parents that only produce a child but never parent that child. And we have it all through society. Somebody that produces a child but does not parent that child, does not train that child, does not affirm and love that child, does not have time with that child, and neglect. And the Bible is clear, if you neglect your child, the devil will be able to come in and have access in your stead. Number 3, rebellion opens a door here. Now I want to show you something. How many people in this room have ever participated in rebellion for at least 30 seconds of your life? Raise your hand. Look around you. What do you see? All the hands. Why are all the hands in every audience up? Because everybody participates in rebellion. Why is that? You say, well, it's human nature. But why is it human nature? Why does the devil promote rebellion? Because, watch this, folks, when you rebel in your attitude, you may still be in the same house. Are you hearing me carefully? You may still be living at home. But when you rebel, you're saying in your heart, I don't need these people. They have failed me anyway. They don't understand me, and I don't need anybody over me. I'm my own person, and I want to do my own thing when I want to do it, and I don't want to be told, and I don't want to be accountable. When you say that, in terms of my little picture here, let me show you where you are in the spirit world. They are not over me. I may be still living in their house, but I am on my own. Everybody see where you are? You are outside the circle, even if you're still living in the house and eating at the table. Now, the Bible says, for this cause shall a person leave father and mother. And we're going to use these words, even though they're not used in all versions of the Bible. For this cause shall a person leave father and mother. What's the reason? Well, use the word so it rhymes so you'll remember it. You leave to what? Cleave. I'm using cleave not because I'm hung up on the word, but because it may help you remember it. For this cause only, one cause, shall a man leave father and mother. That is to what? Cleave to a wife. Or a wife leave father and mother to cleave to a husband. Now everybody watch. In God's intention, you left this protective circle only to come into this protective circle. You leave only for the purpose to cleave to a wife or husband, to start another circle. And in God's way that He set it up, you didn't have independent adult single people. They went immediately from this submitted situation into this submitted situation, and God protected in both cases. In today's society, sometimes we may live there, sometimes we may not live there, but in our attitude, we have left. Now, if the only reason we are to leave is to cleave, and we have left out here, what happens is our driving subconscious desire is to cleave. And that's why it's happening in back seats and in back bedrooms all over the place tonight in your town with young people. And they're saying, wow, is it 2 a.m. already? Don't go home. Oh, I can't wait till you come tomorrow. I can't let go of you. Why are they doing? They're cleaving. And because they're cleaving, one thing leads to another, and they say, wow, we could do more things than we want to do. You know, we try not to do it, but we start doing more than we want to do. And it just happens. And we try to determine we're not going to do that again because we feel really bad about it, but it just ends up happening. Why? Because we're being driven. And it's not just sexuality, folks. It is, let's get stoned, let's get drunk, let's burn down the school, let's rip up and down, let's party, let's party. What is exhilarating that spirit of destructive behavior? It is that you're outside the circle. Now, let me show you what's happening in that circle. I was raised up in southern Idaho in the 50s when they were doing a lot of experimentation in nuclear fission. And what happened was that they found that they could take this atom Everything in the world is made up of an atom. Is that right? Everything in the universe is made up of these little energy fields called atoms. And what happens is you got electrons and neutrons flying around neutrons. And there's atoms in this floor, and there's atoms in this air, and there's atoms in the water. We all learned in chemistry, you know, that water's made up of 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. Is that right? Which makes a molecule. So everything is in this. Now that on the whiteboard is just sitting there static. But what these lines indicate is that there's a dynamic thing happening, that these atoms are actually functioning and dynamic all of the time. The electrons are flying around in the wood and in the couch and in the bricks and everything. The electrons are actually dynamically functioning. Now, this circle here I see to be like this circle here. In other words, there's something dynamic producing character and producing wholeness within the person. That's why God created family. Family is not just any people who happen to be in a house. Family is those who are spiritually joined and who are, through their mutual love and submission, are building one another and strengthening one another and drawing from one another. It's a dynamic thing just like an atom. Now what they discovered is that they could kick one of these little electrons off so it went over here to the next atom, and that started a chain reaction, and that's where we got atomic bombs and nuclear warheads and the heat that produces nuclear power and the greatest destructive force ever known to the human race, just by the escape of one of these little atoms. So when you escape from here in an attitude of rebellion, what dynamic was moving inward to produce good character is now released outward in destructive force. And that's why young people in your town and even older people who are moving in rebellion or hurt are out tonight doing terribly destructive things and being driven to cleave and to have sex with somebody even if it means they're going to die. You see, people are telling me in my relationship series, Dean, warn people about AIDS. Tell them to have protective sex. Listen, I talk to young people almost every week that tell me, hey, listen, I don't care if I die. It doesn't matter. It just happens. I just want to do this. Listen, we need to see why this is being carried outward. Now, what are we going to do about this? What you do in a form of is that you must have a reparenting. Reparenting simply means you must come into submission to somebody, and you must have accountability you must forgive, and you must forgive those who have failed you and come into submission to church, to DTS, to youth group, to some mentor, mutual submission to the church or whatever within the church, to a support group. But there has to be. Alcoholics have found out, even outside Christianity, they have found out they don't get off of their problem until they come into an accountability relationship. So reparenting doesn't mean you need new parents like a mommy and a daddy if you're an adult, but it does mean that you need what parents provide, and that is accountability, communication, affirmation, care, and love. And it's got to come from somewhere. Find a support group, find a church, find a group of friends who can stand with you and that you can have an attitude of submission, an attitude of accountability. And the emphasis here is on attitude. You have not left father or mother if you've gone away to college. You have not necessarily left father or mother if you've moved into an apartment. We're not talking about geography here. We're talking about attitude. And you don't necessarily need to go home to your parents if you are now an adult or if your parents are not functional. And even if you are in a single parent situation, you can still find places to submit and be accountable, because it's the submission and accountability and the support group and the forgiveness that you extend towards those who have failed you and hurt you that will shut down this thing, because you literally form another circle that you're in that tends to have a protection for you. Does everybody understand? Do you see now why God created family? And do you understand how to counsel people to get back into some kind of a support situation with forgiveness and submission and accountability? That's what puts this back together. If you continue in your rebellion, then you will have an acceleration to do fleshly indulgences, and even if you don't do them, it will be hard not to, because there's tremendous impetus. So when young people come to me and say, "Hey, Dean, we're Christians, we love each other, but you know, when we get together, we get really carried away and things end up happening. We feel really bad about it, but things really end up happening, and we do more than we wanted to do." You know what my first question to them is? What is your attitude like towards parents and other authority? And let me tell you something. I'm about to tell you when you did your worst stuff. You ready? I know your life. Let me tell you when you did your worst stuff, and let me tell you when you had your biggest temptations in life. It was when A, parents and authorities failed you, or B, when you were the most rebellious in your attitude. That's when you did your worst stuff. And it's true of everybody. Why? Because that's what releases this tremendous acceleration to, let's do something stupid. I feel like being bad. Or it ended up happening even though I didn't want to. And even as a Christian, the days that you are bitter at what has failed you, whether it's the government or the schools or the church or the pastor that ran off with the secretary, or your parents who got divorced, or your parents who don't have time for you, and you allow bitterness, your pet fleshly indulgence will rage at you. Even if you don't say yes to it, it will rage at you, and you'll say, "Why is this so strong?" It's because of bitterness on one side that you need to forgive to get rid of, and it's because of rebellion on the other side. Does everybody see it? Come on, if some kid comes up to you after you get out of this class and says to you, "I'm having trouble controlling myself sexually, with alcohol, I feel like I got to be partying all the time, I feel like I got to have music all the time, I feel like I'm being driven to this, and I feel like some days I just want to go out and, I don't know, do something violent or something." What are you going to say to them? "I get with my boyfriend and I just can't control myself." What are you going to say to them? You're going to say to them, make sure you've forgiven everybody that's failed you, and make sure there's no rebellion in your life in attitude towards parents and or other authorities, and that you have a submitted attitude. Otherwise, your fleshly indulgences are going to be like a great atomic explosion. Everybody see it? That's why God created that protective circle. Families are not just bodies in a house, folks. Families are a dynamic force building character and building personality, and that's why the devil has been so hell-bent in splitting and breaking down families. And that's why divorce and that's why rebellion are very serious issues. Everybody understand it? Which is why, by the way, the devil will first of all try to get you into a messed up marriage in the first place. Your first, as a single person, the first step towards this issue here is to get you married to a jerk. And you got to know the devil has an absolute accelerated strategy to get you married to somebody that is just crazy. Why? Because that starts it. Because then you're in that thing and all at once you go, "This cannot possibly work." So now what are we going to have? We're going to have a divorce. And boom, it starts. So do you see, he starts way back here in your single years to move you towards total jerkos, so that you fall in love with them, so that you think you can help them, so that you say, well, it's too late, we're so in love, so let's try it. And you get married to jerko, it doesn't work, all kinds of things are going wrong, it's abusive, it's hurtful, it's impossible, and so you go, this cannot work, I'm out of here, boom. We got divorce, we got 2 little kids that are affected by the divorce. It's a strategy of the enemy. Why? Because he wants to wound our society, and that's why we've got the problems we got. Because family was the place that God intended for us to develop wholeness and strength, affirmation and love and care and a sense of identity of who we are. All right, I want to move now into a section called Why Breaking Up is Hard to Do. There is this phenomenon that we have where people who are not necessarily involved sexually, who are not necessarily lascivious or any of these other things that we've talked about, but they have their lives totally smashed up because they have broken up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And I have met people, even in their 60s and 70s, who are still smashed up emotionally by a breakup when they were 16. This is major. And then it's made worse because we go to a youth pastor or a parent and we tell them about our breakup and they say, there's nothing, there's lots of sand on the beach, there's lots of fish in the sea, it was probably just infatuation anyway, and you'll get over it. And then your wound is even greater because you go, they do not understand how deeply this is affecting me. Now, as I've analyzed this over the years, I have asked the Lord to show me why is this such a devastating thing. And I believe we've come up with some understanding. Here are 2 people just bopping around the church or the bank where they work or whatever, minding their own business, and all at once they develop feelings towards each other, as indicated by this projection here of what we call heart. Do you remember heart and mouth? We've used it twice. What does heart and mouth do? It gets you saved. And heart and mouth is the other thing that gets you married. Remember that? So here's a projection of heart or emotions. I like this person. This is a romantic attraction. They like me. Sometimes only one person's involved and the other one's unaffected, which should never happen. But we're assuming in this case both of them are romantically attracted to each other, as opposed to brother and sister. And then the mouth becomes involved, not so much in kissing, but in confessing. And every time you confess something towards somebody whose heart is projected towards you, it's like a little spirit cord that goes over and links you to that other person. Let me illustrate this. What's your name, dear? Misty. Misty, I love you. Now, no particular reaction here, because Misty assumes he's a married man, he's a speaker in the school, we're live on videotape here, therefore he must mean in the Lord or some ridiculous illustration for this message. So there was no reaction with Misty when I said those 3 English words, I love you. But I dare say that there will be some hairy-chested dude who will look into Misty's eyes sometime in the future and say exactly the same words I just said to her, and Misty will run into door casings and will not be able to eat breakfast because it will absolutely knock her off of her feet. Why didn't it knock her off of her feet when I talked to her tonight and said that? And why will it knock her off her feet when somebody does it in the future? Because her heart is not charged towards me romantically, so it didn't affect her. But in the case that we're talking about in the future, her heart will be charged towards this person romantically, which means everything he says to her will be a cord that links to her. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it can be little innocent-like things like, wow, you're the greatest guy I've ever met. Wow, I had a wonderful time tonight. I'd like to do this again. Would you? Oh, thank you for giving me the present. It's not much. Oh, but it came from you. All kinds of stuff. And it's not only words, it's actions that speak. Everybody knows certain actions speak. Does everybody understand that? Let me give you some examples. Come up here, Misty, quick. Okay? Now, everybody understands in our culture that this is called what? Shaking hands. It's a greeting. Hello. Okay? But everybody understands within this culture that it shouldn't go on and on. Now Misty is beginning to feel a little bit awkward because he's not letting go. This feels a little bit weird because shaking hands, she understands, one is saying one thing, but holding hands is a different thing. So why am I not letting go? This is an action that says something within our culture, and she's not wanting to hear it right now because she's going, okay, you can shake my hand, but please let go of my hand because holding hands is not something that should be going on between you and me. Now, why am I illustrating like that? Because I have people come to me all the time and say, well, why'd they make such a big deal about that? All I did was go for walks with them. And how'd they get all in love with me? All I did was kiss and hug them. I mean, I've done that with lots of people. Does he like you? I don't know. We kiss and stuff, but I'm not sure. That is crazy. Why? Because those actions are saying something to your emotions, and you're not sure. Does everybody understand this? Let me give you another example. What's your name? Amy. Amy, you want to go out? Now, Amy's immediately saying, hey, you shouldn't be asking me that. First of all, you're pretty old, and secondly, you have a wife. And I go, oh no, it's not sexual and it's not romantic, let's just go out. But see, in this culture, she goes, going out is an action that says something. So married guys should not go out with single women. Why? Because that's an action that speaks. And let's get brutally honest, folks, when you do little tiny things like that, like, I just thought I might give you these flowers, Amy. And she goes into her room and say, the speaker that's married just gave me flowers? What do you think? Why is that a little buzz there? It's because that's an action that in this culture says something that the married guy shouldn't be saying to the single girl. Now, I'm wanting us to come to a place of honesty because we do things with each other's emotions and then we claim, I didn't mean anything by it. I don't know why they're all in love with me. All I did was sit with them 15 times at lunch but not sit with anybody else. Why they make such a big deal about this? Because actions speak. So the things that you say and the actions you do begin to tie you to another person. And what God doesn't want hit when He comes down through heart and mouth and rivets you together in a marriage is happening gradually here. Now that's not a sinful situation. We're assuming no sexuality is going on here. We're assuming no lasciviousness and concupiscence is going on here. But what happens is we need to understand it's a dangerous situation because you're getting linked to this other person. But because there hasn't been too much time elapsed or too many dates, and we tend to think, well, it was only 3 dates or it was only 6 dates or it was only 1 month we were together. It doesn't matter time. When you're your age, you can fall in love in one afternoon, one bus ride. Okay? Now, what happens then is often the other person splits. They show up at church with somebody else. They say to you on the last day of the school, hey, look, actually I got a friend back home and I just, I didn't think it was on, but I just got a letter from her and it's really, on, and sorry, it's been nice to be with you while we've been here, but, Or they write you a letter and say, Dear John, how I hate to write, but I don't feel like the Lord wants us to go with each other anymore. Which is how to make them angry at God rather than angry at you. Cute little Christian trick. Now, what's happened here is this person is absolutely dying inside. And sometimes it affects their whole life. And I'm asking, and you want to know, why is this so devastating? And about the only way I can think to illustrate it is to point out this tooth here in front. You see this particular tooth in my mouth? That tooth right now there is not a true tooth. That is a false tooth. And it's now bridged all of these teeth across here. What happened to that tooth is when I was 10 years old, I attended a baseball game. And I was standing too near to this baseball game. And in baseball, of course, you get 3 strikes and then you're out, and sometimes that's very frustrating. And this man who struck out in the baseball game threw his bat in frustration into the crowd, and I was standing there watching this baseball game, and the bat hit me straight in the mouth. Now, I ran home with tremendous pain and swelling going on in my face, blood streaming down my chin and down my shirt, and as I looked into the mirror at home, I saw that my tooth had been broken off diagonally like this, and instead of a tooth, I had this fang hanging in my mouth. And this piece was missing. As I looked closer into the mirror, I could actually see in the mirror, dangling from the center of this tooth, a nerve hanging in midair. And then I understood why my face was convulsing, and this was the most intense, agonizing pain that I have ever felt. Now, the reason I use this as an illustration is to, number one, keep your attention. But number two, it is the only thing I have ever felt that remotely feels like the pain that when somebody you really care about says, "Sorry, it's over. I never really liked you that much anyway, you know." And you feel the same kind of pain as a nerve hanging out, and sometimes it takes you months and years to recover. Now, what is wrong in this picture, boys and girls, is the same thing that's wrong in this picture. There are 2 things wrong in both pictures. Take them down. Number one, the reason there's pain here is not because nerves are bad. And the reason there's pain here is not because relationships are bad. But the reason there's pain here is because, number one, the nerve is extended into an atmosphere it was never made to be in. The nerve is extended into an atmosphere it was never meant to be in. And your romantic emotions were never meant to be extended into an atmosphere without some kind of embrace. The nerve is extended into an atmosphere it was never meant to be in. And number two, the reason that there's pain here, number two, is that which is to be committed to the nerve is missing. And that which is to be committed to your emotional life is not there. God only intended your emotions to be extended where they were going to be embraced. Did you hear that? God only meant your emotions to be extended into an atmosphere where they would be embraced. And that's why breaking up is hard to do. That is why breaking up is hard to do. Now, when the song came out, and it came out way back, and then it came out again 25 years later, singing "Breaking Up is Hard to Do," it's really true, but there's a reason. It's because your emotions are extended into an atmosphere that is meant to be embraced by somebody else's commitment. And that's why there's so much pain involved. Now, how can we diminish the possibility of this pain happening? How can we diminish the possibility of us falling into sexual sin together? How can we diminish or enhance a relationship that grows together with a man and a woman that diminishes the possibility of pain and diminishes the possibility of wrong action that grieves God and causes problem within your life, as we have already said? I want to give you now 3 lists. List number 1 will be a dating philosophy, or if you don't believe in dating, a relationship philosophy. List number 2 will be a dating progression, and list number 3 will be what to do if you've already blown it. How you can be redeemed and brought back. So list number one is a philosophy of relationship. A philosophy of relationship. You do not love God if you have any more relationship with the opposite sex without a clear-cut philosophy. Did you hear what I said? You do not love God. You do not really love the neighbor you're going to have a relationship with unless you got a clear-cut philosophy of relationship before you ever get in another one or proceed with the one you're in now. And you don't really honor and love yourself if you don't have clear ground rules and clear philosophy before you get into another relationship or continue in the one you have now. It is unloving just to hold your nose and jump off the deep end of the pool and say, well, we'll see what happens. It'll happen. So you need a clear-cut philosophy. This is who I am. This is how I play it. This is what I'm going to do. Now let me give you some suggestions about a clear-cut philosophy of relationship. Number one, get your motives right. Get your motives right. That'll cut out a lot of dating right there. Why do you want to be with that person? Is it just because everybody has a boyfriend? I need one. Everybody has a girlfriend? I need one. I don't know much about them, but at least I have a boyfriend. I have a girlfriend. They may be a jerk, but at least I have one. There's great shame in this culture if somebody finds out you're not going with anybody. How come you never go out? How come you don't go with somebody? Do you have a boyfriend? How come? When did you have your last boyfriend? That long? You have a girlfriend? How come you don't have a girlfriend? What's wrong with you? You must be weird, man. This is poor motive for having a relationship. I just want to have somebody. I just want to be out with somebody. I want to go out. I want to do something with somebody. I want to be attached to somebody. Or there can even be worse motives. I want to handle somebody's body. Boy, look at that one. I wouldn't mind going out with that one, boy. Wouldn't it be good to get your hands on that, get your arms around that. Boy, wouldn't that be great? Or there's even worse motives than that. I wonder if I could make this person fall for me. I wonder if I could get this person in bed. We date one another and we relate to one another for really bad motives. Now, basically, folks, if you got selfish motives, don't even do it. Only date somebody in the future and only go with somebody for loving motives. That doesn't mean you got to go to church every time. It doesn't mean that you even have to pray together every time, but it does mean that the motive is to get to know them. The motive is to enhance their life. The motive is to honor God and honor them and honor yourself. And if you're not going to be honoring God and honoring the neighbor and honoring yourself, don't do it, because Christians don't do anything that doesn't honor God. Christians don't do anything that doesn't honor and love people, because this is the message and this is the commandment. That you love, honor, care for, value somebody. And lots of dating does not honor and value anybody. It's just, I want to go somewhere. I want to go out. I want to use your body. I want to use your time. I want to show up in front of my buddies and show them that I got one that looks this way. Oh, look at that. Look at who he's with. Look at who she's with. Oh, look. That is a bad motive. Okay? Number two, avoid the dating syndrome. Avoid the dating syndrome. Or don't date just to date. What is the dating syndrome? It's something we've developed in this culture that says, have a date. Go out.